Hi, this is Dr. Toni Cooper. Just a reminder, this is not a substitute for medication or counseling. If you're having thoughts of harming yourself or another person, or if this material triggers you, please contact your doctor or a mental health specialist to discuss your concerns. You can find my audio books, self-help books, and devotional books on Amazon. My videos are on YouTube, and you can listen to my podcast, Life Without Baggage, on your favorite platform. Now, here are some excerpts from my audiobook, How to Stop Self-Criticism. I am going to talk about a little bit about the roots of self-criticism, and then I'm going to weave back and forth between the spiritual ways to interrupt it and the psychological, practical ways to interrupt it. So the roots of self-criticism, they come from some different places. So if you tend to be a perfectionist, or if you were raised with sort of a demanding, critical parent, if you were shamed a lot, if you live in a degree of irrational guilt, there's guilt that we should feel when we do something bad, but then it should go away when we apologize or when we confess it to the Lord. So if you live with a lot of what I call irrational guilt that leads to self-criticism, if you've been through a lot of rejection, you are probably more prone to self-criticism. And if you are a survivor of some type of trauma, the earlier things happen, the more difficult it is for people, but even later in life. We can get into a way of thinking where we blame ourselves and are constantly looking at what's wrong with us or what we think is wrong with us. And that we're not really enjoying life that way. So it's a big problem for people. So first I'm going to start with the journal exercises. Now, in terms of the journal exercises, a simple way to get started is to list 10 strengths or 10 achievements that you are proud of, that you recognize. It's best if you make this list yourself, but you could ask somebody to help you. But I think it's best if you do that for yourself. The other way to use a journal is to keep writing down the negative self-talk and then how to counter it with a coaching statement. I'm going to explain that in a few minutes. Now, generally speaking, there's a few negative things that people say to themselves over and over, like, I'm stupid, or I'm not trying hard enough, or I don't know what I'm doing. It varies from person to person, but chances are there's a few that you use over and over. So when I say write down negative self-talk in your journal, hopefully there's not more than 4 or 5 that you do pretty often. Now, as you are using a journal and writing down the negative thoughts, I'm going to show you how to watch or notice perfectionistic demands that you're putting on yourself, and then ways to soften it with a replacement thought or counter or coaching statement, whatever you want to call it. So some of this is you have to notice it before you can change it, and you have to have something to change it to. We can't just eliminate something. Something has to go in its place. Now, if these like straightforward things don't help, then sometimes we have to go a little bit deeper and look for the roots. So this is a lot of what I do with people in my office. And the way that you do that is think about situations early in life where there was pain, where there was anger, where there was betrayal, and you might want to make some notes. And I really think the more specific you can be, the better your results are going to be. So you want to journal some specifics of events and situations and the pain or anger connected to it. The next step is the hardest. So I'm going to come back to that. Now, I mentioned that if you have some perfectionistic tendencies, maybe you don't even know that you have perfectionistic tendencies. This is how you can figure out if you do. So if you're working on this, you can journal your daily stress, the reaction you had, maybe your feelings are hurt, the frustrations you're having, and as honest as you can be, write down your thoughts about it, your feelings and your thoughts. Journaling is the most powerful if you don't just write feelings, don't just write thoughts. A lot of people write down what happened, but they're still not writing down what they think about it or how they feel about it. The more that you can incorporate the thoughts and the feelings, the more power there's going to be in this journal exercise. So you want to notice if you are saying things or writing things about I should have, I ought to, I never get things right. I never understand what's happening. I always get criticized. So these black and white extreme ways of talking to ourselves may be related to perfectionism, but it's black and white thinking, and black and white thinking is, the world isn't usually black and white. There are some things that are. There are some, I have beliefs about there's right and there's wrong. But a lot of things in life, they're not black and white. They're not all or nothing. If you can sort of work with yourself on the things where you tend to go to the extremes, the all or nothing, the should, the ought to, the never, especially when it's related to self-criticism. So once you recognize it, you can replace it. I'm going to show you some slides how to do that. Today, we're focused on what we're expecting of ourselves, how we talk to ourselves when we make a mistake, how we talk to ourselves when we're trying to make changes. So here's some samples of things that might show up in a journal, and then a way to talk to yourself. There are a lot of people that they know how to speak encouraging things to their friends, to their children, to their partner. So really, you're just learning how to do that for yourself. Many of us talk smack to ourselves, things we would never say to other people. So you want to be mindful of how would you talk to a friend, to someone you love, to a child, where it's not really positive thinking, it's realistic, helpful thinking. So here's some samples. They probably think I'm doing a lousy job. A response to that you might want to write down in your journal would be, there's no evidence for that. When we try to read somebody's mind, you're probably going to be wrong. Okay, I ought to be doing better. Instead, you can say, I'm doing my best. This is good enough for now. Notice that word ought, that's that perfectionistic kind of all or nothing. Okay, I'll never get this right. A different thing to say to yourself is, I'm growing and learning. I don't have to be perfect. Many of you have heard me talk about how I'm always having to work on how I talk to myself when I play pickleball. When I make mistakes, especially if I think it was an easy shot, I get frustrated. So I have to be very careful that I don't start talking smack to myself and say, that was so easy. Why did you miss that? I mean, I may say it, but then I try to correct it right away and say, hey, I'll do better the next time. I'm still learning. I'm not going to be perfect. So I have to use this on myself. But once you learn how to do this, it works for all kinds of different things because life throws things at us that we need to know how to cope with. All right, I'm going to give you some more samples. Here's some related to confidence. One negative thought might be, I'm a failure. Instead, you can say, I've made some mistakes. I can keep working on things. I don't fit in. There are people who appreciate me. I don't have to be liked by everyone. And the negative thoughts are automatic. You can't really control whether or not you get the negative thought. What you have a choice about is whether or not you give it a lot of room, whether you dwell on it, or whether you gently just try to shift to a different way of thinking. I use the example of train tracks. There's certain train tracks that are pretty automatic in our brains. It's just the way that our brain is going to take us. but we can build new train tracks. So every time you interrupt the negative thought and then practice the positive thought, which you want to write in your journal so that you can go back to it and rehearse it, then we're building the new train tracks. And little by little, the new train track, the new way of thinking becomes easier and more natural. It might feel a little bit forced at first, but it's just because it's new. After a while, anything we practice becomes smoother, becomes more automatic. So I talked a little bit about the roots. I talked a little bit about the way of thinking and the journaling. So here's where I want to go back to the idea of the spiritual strategies to stop self-criticism related to prayer, imagery, and forgiveness. We choose to forgive for our own well-being. And forgiveness is a choice, not a feeling. And it is also not the same as trusting. Some people are afraid to forgive because they think that means they have to trust that person again. And that isn't what forgiveness is. So we may need to change our boundaries based on how we've been treated by someone. And then if you're a person of faith, you can use prayer to take these to the cross of Jesus, the pain. So it's very simple. You just say, Lord, I choose to forgive. And then you name the person, name what they did to you, and you can say, I ask you, Lord, to take the pain, the anger out of my heart, out of my thinking, even out of my physical body. Sometimes we carry things in our bodies. So it's very simple. I'm not really sure where I learned that from, but this is how, if you are a person of faith, you can use your faith to release things, and then you can ask the Lord to fill you with his peace. If you are not a person of faith, there's still imagery you can use. Some people like the image of putting something in a boat and then you push it out to sea, or you put it inside of a balloon and you let the balloon float away. Put it in that balloon and let it float away. So imagery is very powerful, but again, the more specific you are, the more power that these exercises have. So the other thing that we need to do is make sure that we have positive supports. You don't need a lot of supports if you have one or two good ones. And if you're fortunate, you might have a family member or a best friend or a partner that helps you when you're being too hard on yourself, when you're not sure how to look at things. But a lot of people don't have that. So you might need to build some supports. And ways to do that is you can be part of a club. Sometimes hobbies will help you make new friends. Formal support groups, 12-step groups. Your church probably has some small groups, a women's group, a men's group, a Bible study. And other people build supports through volunteering. I have a lot of clients that are volunteering in some kind of a Christian ministry, and they build some very strong supports that way. So those are good ways to keep moving and help you maintain your effort. It can be discouraging at first when you're trying to make a change. And so we all need people in our corner that help us keep moving. Thanks for listening. If this helped you, you can find my other videos on YouTube. You can find my podcast, Life Without Baggage, on your favorite platform, or visit my website to see all my media. Thanks for listening.